Welcome back to Counterpoint. We are unpacking the election results from Manitoba, and joining me now is Darren Penner, a Conservative commentator, and former Liberal MP, Lawrence Toet. Lawrence,
Former
just
Conservative MP.
former Conservative MP. There we go. We have, I guess, a panel of Conservatives. So, we were talking just before the commercial break about the voter divide. It's always usually rural voters pitted against urban voters. Did that play out in the same way we've traditionally seen in provincial elections in Manitoba?
Well, I think to some degree we did see that. The rural vote definitely did stay mostly conservative, and it was the city vote. And I think everybody knew that coming in the last months that this election was going to be decided on the city of Winnipeg. And unfortunately for the Conservatives, they were not able to hold a number of those seats that were important for them to hold in order to form government.
Okay, well, let's dive into some of these issues. There was talk about COVID, and this, I believe, is the first election that has been held since COVID. So, did the government's handling of COVID factor into this election at all? Darren, what are your thoughts?
So I think it did, but not directly on the ballot. I think where COVID factored in is that Heather Stephenson never received a honeymoon as PC leader. Usually, when there's a new leader elected, the leader gets a rallying from the party grassroots and fundraising goes up and everybody's excited. And in the aftermath of the leadership race we had here, what you were left with was a COVID situation that was surging, a province divided, and a party that was tied up in court for 4 or 5, 6 months after the election, fighting over the process that had played out.
Right.
That's not helpful to any leader, and it was a lot to overcome.
Yes, I can imagine that. Lawrence, in your opinion, did COVID and the lockdowns and the case numbers and the death numbers, did that factor in, do you think, in the voters' minds when they went to the ballot boxes?
I would say COVID more in the sense of the division in Manitoba that occurred. And it was a challenging time. And for any government, COVID was a time of there was no playbook, and how do you exactly get it right? And no government did get it perfectly right. I think any government that is honest will look back and say, we wished we had done certain things differently. So I think it did play a role in the sense that Manitobans were frustrated with some of the things that they faced during that time, and I think the government paid for some of that frustration.
Now, obviously, and this has been mentioned previously, healthcare really was front and center in this election cycle. How realistic, Darren, do you feel that it is for the NDP when they made obviously election promises to increase spending, but also to attract and hire more nurses and doctors?
Sure. So the NDP's promise was to attract more nurses and doctors, and the tangible outcome they promised people is that they're going to open 3 new emergency rooms in Winnipeg. And that promise was their entire campaign platform on healthcare, and they talked about it almost every day. It's going to be very easy for them to do that because what you're going to see is that 1 year before the next election, they're going to take the urgent care signs down and they're going to put them in storage. They're going to take the emergency room signs out and put them back in front of the hospitals. And they're going to say they opened 3 new emergency rooms. The reality is it's going to be a lot harder to solve the actual underlying problem, which is an overburdened healthcare system without enough resources.
Now, Lawrence, obviously, when we deal with healthcare, we're looking at it's a provincial kind of managed program, but it's federal transfers that are paying for this. Do you feel that Premier-elect Kinu, that his plan is feasible? Do you think this is something that Manitobans are desperate for, but do you think it's something he can actually deliver on?
He's going to be really challenged to deliver on that. Commentators even during the campaign had kind of called him out on that. There's a shortage of doctors and nurses. There's a healthcare challenge right across Canada right now, and it's a staffing issue. And opening emergency rooms without the proper staffing would be a very dangerous thing to do. So we need to make sure that we have the proper staffing in place. And I sure hope it doesn't come to what Mr. Penner was alluding to, that in year 4 that they don't have the facilities really prepared, but that they just change signs from urgent to emergency, because that would indeed put Manitobans in jeopardy, their lives in jeopardy. And I sure hope that isn't the route that happens. But it's going to be a real challenge for him to be able to deliver on those promises of 3 emergency rooms, because it's not a matter of facilities, it's a matter of personnel, and personnel is a huge challenge in healthcare right across Canada, and in fact, around the world right now.
Absolutely, especially when we hear about so many doctors retiring early, they're burnt out, especially post-COVID. It's been definitely very challenging. We're going to pick up this discussion in just a few moments.